Hello guys, Tops here. Today I have a concept, an idea, and I think there is a hit point soft cap in Battle Brothers, and that soft cap is at 100 hit points. And of course you can level hit points as long as you want, and you always get the 25% returning value from Colossus. But what I mean is like leveling past 100 hit points makes a lot of the time not so much sense, in my opinion. And now we get into the concept. If you have 100 hit points, there are still things that might one-shot you, but it's very rare. Outside of like Orc Flail Berserkers, you're not getting one-shotted if you have 85 hit points or more. So like the threshold of like being immune to one-shots is around like 85 to 90 hit points with Steelbrow on Battleforge, and I think on Nimble basically doubles your HP. It's so like a 77 Nimble guy has like 150 HP or something, so he's even more resilient even without Steelbrow. So, and the concept that I want to explain, or the argument that I want to make is the last 20 hit points, they will make it so that you might survive another hit. But if you would have 20 more resolve or 20 more fatigue, it would be in a lot of cases probably more useful. And I will, let's break that down. So this is of course a god tank, so he has everything. But let's just imagine we have like an average frontliner who has like only something like 40 resolve, right? So like having, just imagine I have the option between 120 hit points and 60 resolve, right? So the 20 hit points, they might make it so I survive another hit, maybe, but the 20 resolve, so like if I have 100 hit points and I get another 20 hit points, that's a 20% increase in my hit points, right? But if I have 40 resolve and I get another 20 resolve, that's a 50% increase in my resolve. So it makes it much more likely that I don't take a negative moral check if I get hit by an attack, and I don't drop my moral state from like content to wavering or breaking, which lowers my defensive stats. And I feel like the resilience of being more resilient to these moral attacks, especially versus fearsome opponents, like Ancient Undeads who have negative 20 moral when they hit you. You have effectively like 20 resolve versus the fearsome check if you take hit point damage. So you have an 80% chance of failing a moral check versus an Ancient Undead if you have only 40 resolve, right? And you take hit point damage. So having 60 resolve, right, would basically make it twice as likely, because now you have a 40% chance. You have 40 resolve and you have a 40% chance of passing that moral check. It would make it twice as likely to pass a moral check of an Ancient Undead, right? So, which is kind of like having higher resolve is a defense against not being hit as much, right? Because you have better states of moral, right? You're not losing 10% of your stats because you are wavering, or 20% if you're breaking, and you don't drop to fleeing, or it is at least less likely. If you are a damage dealer and you have 100 hit points, 20 more fatigue, right, is an additional round of attacks that you have. Maybe even a second round of attack, right? Maybe a second attack, depending on the circumstances. If you have one-handed or two-handed weapons, and what kind of weapons, right? If you are a tank, like the plus 20 hit points is kind of nice, but having plus additional 20 fatigue makes it so you can have another round of shield wall or indom, right? So it makes it more likely that you have another round before you have to recover, if you have recover. Or it makes it more likely that you can just use another round of your defensive stats, and that gives your team another round to help you out, right, and kill your opponents, so you don't have to tank as much. And of course, on a tank, I think one of the most important things on a tank is having high resolve. So having additional 20 resolve on a tank significantly increases your survivability. And you can increase resolve with Fortified Mind the same way you can increase hit points with, right? Both of these things give you plus 25% of resolve or hit points. With fatigue, it's worse because I don't get a perk that gives me plus 25% fatigue. I only get Brawny, which gives me 30% fatigue reduction from my gear. So that means fatigue is it's harder to get and therefore more valuable. So having 20 fatigue or having 25 resolve or 25 hit points in that case, right? So fatigue is harder to get, but like you need fatigue for everything in this game. So having fatigue is kind of nice unless you are fatigue neutral, which I don't like too much. But guys, just imagine this guy had 20 more fatigue. That would completely change the bro, or 20 more resolve would make him much stronger, right? Much more prone to go on his own and do stuff. Much less likely to fail moral checks. And that's kind of a concept that I always felt when I made characters, especially nimble characters, where it's like I have to max out hit points and go to 120, 130 hit points. But in the end, especially on nimble characters, those last 20, 30 hit points, you will have no armor left. And even if you have 60% damage reduction, like something like a sword or a spear might cut you down on your last 20 hit points, right? Because, you know, just a sword can do like 40 damage, 50 damage, depends on the roll, right? Maybe if they have a double grip, even more. Like axes, and we are not talking about orc axes or orc cleavers or any kind of, and we are not talking about two-handed weapon either. So like, I feel like your last hit points are less valuable anyways. So having like preemptively increased your resolve or your fatigue instead to be able to survive moral checks and be able to use another shield wall, another indom, or another attack to kill your opponent is probably in the most cases more worth it. Assuming, of course, we have the free choice, right? And most of the time we have the free choice, like what we spend our level points in, right? When we level up. And yeah, that's kind of it. And I'm just looking here. I always feel like for Battleforge, I'm always around like, I try to hit the 85 mark with Colossus, and like sometimes I level it to 80, to 90, I mean. And with Nimble, like a lot of the times I just have even lower values, especially on like bros that don't take as much contact. And okay, these guys are just trashy, and these are fencers, so it's a little bit tough. So especially on Nimble, because Nimble basically doubles your HP, you can get away with lower hit points. And I always felt like, sure, I can maybe survive an additional hit, but I have massively spent hit points. Like right? So I have excessively leveled hit points. If I instead would have put these 20 resolve points in resolve, I would be much more likely to not lose morale, because especially Nimble struggles versus fearsome, and the moral checks that are getting procced when you get hit, right? So yeah, I feel like especially on Nimble, you shouldn't overlook resolve too much, and maybe having a little bit lower hit points and therefore more resolve is the play here, right? Generally you have light gear, so you have more fatigue anyways. And I always feel like on tanks, you want to max out resolve, and having like around 100 hit points, maybe even less on Battleforge, like 90, 85, that's probably enough. Having additional 20 fatigue or resolve in that case would make you probably more survivable, because you get another indom, another shield wall, you get another, and you are much more likely to not drop moral from being hit or opponent stepping on your field, right? Yeah, and that's kind of like my idea about the hit point soft cap that exists in Battle Bros. I think it rarely makes sense to level hit points above 100. And if you have the choice to level hit points above 100, right? So if you have like a farmhand who has like 70 HP and you give him Colossus and he's already at like 90 plus, that's probably good enough. Investing the other stat points in stuff like fatigue and especially resolve might be much more valuable. Yeah. And of course, we are assuming the thing is like if you get 20 hit points, with Colossus you would get 25. If you have 20 resolve, if you have Fortified Mind, you would get 25 resolve because you get plus 25 increase. If you have 20 fatigue, you don't get an increase. So fatigue has no returning value from stats, but I would argue is therefore more valuable, especially on something like tanks and on fatigue intensive builds, because it is harder to get fatigue, right? And a lot of the perks that I choose, like Weapon Mastery, Pathfinder, stuff like Brawny, Quick Hands, gives me additional fatigue, right? So fatigue might be a valuable stat overall. Again, just some concepts, some ideas. I would be really interested, guys, if you level your brothers above 100 hit points and why you do so, right? And also, I think 9 lives is a really good defensive perk. And if you have 9 lives, like even like 85 to 90 hit points, it's probably fine, because especially Orc Berserkers, even with like 100 hit points, they one-shot you if they high roll on headshots, even with Steel Brawl. So I feel like at the point of like 85 plus HP, 85 to 100 HP, a significant increase in survivability only comes from another perk, which is 9 lives, which, because of the returning of the additional stats that you get from 9 lives, you're overall much more survivable. It's an insurance against dying, so to speak. Yeah, that's kind of like stuff that is in my mind. I would be really interested what you guys think about hit points and how much hit points you give your brothers, and what do you prefer on Nimble, what do you prefer on Battleforged. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video, guys. Have a nice day. Bye bye.